Welcome back, everyone. We now go to the official opposition, Mr. Harris.
Thanks, guys. Well, look, I'm going to move on to another issue, which I know you'll be prepared for coming from myself, and that's regional cardiac care in Kitchener, St. Mary's. Hoping you're going to have...
Sound area.
And you have a, did you want to get something in?
I just want, it serves the British Grey Island Sound.
Yes, of course.
Very important.
So, Minister and Deputy, you know, we had an exchange last year in estimates on this very topic. And then it was great to see the Minister in KW back in, I guess, the late spring, summertime to make a re-announcement of an earlier commitment in 2012 to fund electrophysiology suite at St. Mary's Hospital from 2012. We're frankly still no further ahead than where we were in 2012, or rather in 2016. As you'll know, the Waterloo Region LHIN, or at least even St. Mary's, because it actually services even outside of our LHIN into my colleagues' LHIN, over 1.3 million folks. And I compare that to South Lake and Trillium, similar sized LHINs, I suppose, 1.8 at South Lake, 1.2 at Trillium. Minister, you were back last spring and made that commitment that we're good to go after some time with the electrophysiology suite. Had said that it would likely be up and running by fall of 2017, and like my previous question, we're now fall of 2017 and we are absolutely nowhere with regards to this. Minister, why do we not have an electrophysiology suite at the St. Mary's Hospital?
Well, I remember that announcement. It was tremendous. I remember you were there.
I was.
And the hospital was very excited in the community with them, as they should be, because it was the right investment. The building on a program, a nascent program that we had cultivated and enhanced and grown together with the hospital over a number of years. But my specific role when I was there, so it was a year ago this past spring, I think, right? June of 2016. And I announced at that time that the $7 million for their cath lab. And at that point, of course, I wouldn't make the announcement if the program hadn't been approved. However, since that time, and I would say welcome, the hospital asked to expand that program further. So it was an enhancement to an approved program, the $7 million for the cath lab that I mentioned. And that expansion would entail an additional investment, I think, of approximately $2 million capital, and as yet to be determined operational. So when that enhancement, that if I can call it sort of, it wouldn't be a phase two, because we had migrated as well over a number of years to where they arrived with the cath lab funding. So that led to a discussion between the hospital and the LHIN and the ministry with regards to their new request for expansion and the estimated $2 million capital required for that. And I think, and I'm sure you appreciate as well, that as projects and proposals are brought forward to LHINs and to the ministry, we need to appropriately undertake a rigorous evaluation of the appropriateness and the cost effectiveness, the benefit of the program, and in addition, especially when it comes to cardiac centers, I think there are 19 or 20 of them around the province, that we need to look at it in a broader context as well, and how it fits in with the overall provision of cardiac care and the services that those cardiac centers provide. So that being said, my understanding, and I'm happy to, Peter might want to come up and join us if you have additional questions, that he's the best placed to answer them. But that is just to provide some clarity in terms of the enthusiasm of all parties as expressed back in 2016 for our approval of what had been requested for their cath lab, and then an additional new phase for expansion coming to us, which, of course, I think you can appreciate requires rigorous evaluation before approval.
Yeah, I think perhaps we'll differ slightly on this, and maybe, is it Peter?
Yeah.
Peter, you can
introduce
clarify. So you came out and announced funding, a commitment for capital as well as operational funds for the electrophysiology suite, EP lab, let's just say EP lab. Dr. Bell, of course, he's the surgeon, he'll know the terms properly, but I'll call it an EP lab. And the construction, so the approval for that capital project was given, green light. Now, is there a letter, I guess, that has to come out following that announcement, or you didn't bring a
Prior
check,
to.
I'm assuming then, but there's a letter.
You don't remember the giant check?
Hey, who doesn't like a giant check? But I didn't see you bring the check out, but, so is there a letter that's?
There would have been a letter that would
And so
precede the announcement.
Yeah, has the hospital received a letter for that commitment specific to the announcement you made in June, been issued?
Peter?
Hi, Peter Kafterian. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Health Capital Division at the Ministry of Health. My understanding is, yes, there would have been a letter at that time approving the project, and that would be our standard procedure.
So there would have been a letter issued for that EP lab specific to that proposal that was submitted, and then the minister confirmed it. I guess, so how come we're still a year late? How come after a year, when they said the anticipated construction completion date would be fall of 2017, how come, we haven't issued a tender for that? And, Dr. Bell talked about the air handling and all the specifics, and I get that there's a lot of work to be done to create that spec, but how come that hasn't gone out to the street yet for that? And I guess I'll go back, because we disagree, Minister, or I'm going to disagree with you. Supposedly there was another request, which is true, for a cardio diagnostic testing space that was submitted back in March. I had a chance to speak to the board chair recently at the hospital. Now, this was a specific, separate application that should have had nothing to do with the EP lab. Peter, is that you received another proposal from St. Mary's for this cardio diagnostic testing space, I believe in March, separate to the EP, right?
There's been an evolution in the capital process. There have been changes in the scope, and I can explain a little bit about, or the proposed scope, what's happening.
But did the hospital not submit separately from the EP?
I'm not sure specifically what was the separate piece. But I can tell you exactly what's going on and how we got to where we are, if you'd like me to.
Okay, go ahead.
So project was approved at a vision of what they were trying to achieve, and as we work through the capital process, which is our industry standard 5-stage process, we have to do a back and forth with the hospital in the LHIN in February in their stage 2 submission. So stage 2 is the functional program, and the tender place you're looking for is in your stage 4. So the stage 2, they wanted to change around what was being done in the project. We're working closely with the hospital on the changes they wanted to make. So there was an original project approved. They want to look at a bigger footprint, doing different levels of procedures and volumes, and that is the dialogue that we have with the hospitals and LHINs on changes. And if there's going to be a change, we need to have support from the LHIN. We need to look at the ability to fund, and it's possible to change around because things change. Like, this project could have been planned 5, 6, 7 years ago, and by the time it actually became reality, the vision or the purpose of what they wanted to build was different. And this would be normal, but this is part of the diligence of our process where we had the dialogue. So as of just a few weeks ago, I was personally having discussions with the LHIN CEO, with the hospital CEO, with other members of the ministry on the new ideas that they want to put forward. We asked for clarity on what exactly was originally approved, what exactly is new, and give us a nice simple table. It came from the CEO. We reviewed it, and we asked some questions about, do you have various approval, and we provided that information to the hospital within the last 7 to 10 days. And now they're working on answers to those questions.
Did the hospital ever ask for them to be considered very separate? And at any time, did you have a conversation with hospital officials that this cardio diagnostic testing space be treated very separately? And if it hinged at all on a potential delay for the EP lab, to hold off on that?
Yes, so we have had that conversation. I remember with the CEO about, are there pieces of this they could do separately or at a later date, and then we could just continue forward with the existing approval.
Okay.
That's what we're working through right now to see if that could be possible, but it may make sense to bundle them as opposed to doing two separate things. And as we work through this process, we can work through that.
Has the 2 million for this cardio diagnostic testing space been approved?
It has not, no.
It is not. So any anticipated timelines for, that at all?
So I think it depends on how we work through right now the Q&A. So this is, we're cognizant of how long this has taken. I say this is a high priority to get clarity on. The CEO is very interested, both the Lynn CEO and hospital CEO, with having a revised direction, and the CEO has made it clear around, we want to move this forward. So it either moves forward with the original scope and you separate out the new, or if we can figure out a way to do it together with the cost share that we have to do, we are trying to move this forward.
So if they said, let's separate the two and let's focus on the EP lab, would that be something that the ministry would entertain and move forward with?
Yeah, something we
If they had have said that though in the initial, which I believe is the conversation, why wouldn't we have proceeded with that EP lab, the construction of? I mean, again, your minister came out, or our minister came out and announced this and said, we're going to have this up and running by the fall of 2017. We're now into the fall of 2017, and you haven't lifted a hammer up there. I mean,
So we can certainly look at that, but I think it's important, was it February, when, and we invited the hospital to submit both stage 1 and stage 2 in an integrated fashion. It was the hospital at that point when they submitted, they changed the scope and nature.
yeah, it was actually separate. It's very separate.
Well-
I think that we, perhaps,
So we-
Minister, your officials should
Peter?
properly brief you on this one, because to my
So-
understanding, they're very separate.
Right, but so the note that I have certainly indicated that the hospital expanded the scope both in terms of space requirements and cost to accommodate anticipated growth in diagnostics.
Right, but not
and
for-
potential addition of a TAVI
But
program.
not for the EP
So-
lab, not for the EP lab that you
So
announced.
I'm happy to look, I mean, if we need to
I
look
just-
into this to get
It's
clarity
just,
for you on this, I'm happy to look
The
into it.
foundation's done tremendous work. We're one of 11 full-service, or should be full-service regional cardiac care centers. The only one, in fact, the only one that doesn't have a full-service cardiac care complement of services. I mean, as I said to you before, Southlake and Trillium came on at the same time that St. Mary's did. They have EP, they have TAVI, both of them. Well, no, it is true. And our St. Mary's Regional Cardiac Center
Yeah.
doesn't have both.
Well, but
Minister,
that's-
how come in a population that St. Mary's serves
So,
of
but
1.3
that's why
million?
we made the investment of $7 million in 2016. And so the point being, I think all of us want this to proceed as quickly as possible. Sometimes, if you're looking at a cardiac program through an individual hospital, I think all of us would expect that we have a good understanding of whether all of those parts, whether it's best to deal with them as one whole at one time. If it involves renovations, for example, or adjacent space, I don't know the nature of what is required on the capital side, but I think it's important to reference, and I'm happy, we'll look into this. What has been submitted to the ministry has significant differences from what was approved in 2016, including, for example, the potential addition of a TAVI program, which we can get into more details about that, but the space requirements and the cost requirements, which, and in fact, even my understanding is that it roughly tripled the anticipated startup volumes that would be seen. And so it would be incumbent upon us as a government to do a proper evaluation with our partner, with the hospital, with the LHIN, to understand what the operational implications of that are. So it may be that separating the various elements is an appropriate way to move forward, but I think it's important to reinforce that, at least this is our understanding, to reinforce that there was a significant investment that was committed last year. You were there.
Yeah.
And we fully intend on proceeding with this as we were moving through the various stages, which would ultimately result in the construction and operation of that facility. The nature of the project changed.
Yeah, I don't think it, from my understanding, it hasn't. It's
Well,
two
let's
separate.
maybe on
It's two
both-
separate projects. And, it's, I know
In
your
the same-
member
but
from
it's in the
Kitchener
same-
Center
I think it's in the same
is probably
space.
frustrated as much as I am on this. And we were hoping that this would have been, we've lost 2 electrophysiologists already. We have, a brilliant electrophysiologist, which, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Now
But I
practicing
think-
out
I
of
think we
London,
would have-
to keep his skills up to date. You know what, again, a population of 1.3 million plus, regional cardiac care center, wonderful
Of course.
facility.
That's why we made the investment.
Comparable to South Lake and Trillium, and we don't have EP.
That's why we made the
don't
investment,
have
with
TAVI.
respect.
And, you've committed to it back in 2012, back in 2016, and,
But if the,
again,
if the
nothing.
project that was submitted for a combined stage 1-2, which is, that in itself is to expedite it further, if that had have been consistent with the approval that was provided in June of 2016, I think we would have been much further along.
Yeah,
But
we'll
it's
go,
like-
we,
it's-
we
but
could,
it's
we'll
like
go
a
back
decision.
and it'll be like a,
broken record on
Groundhog
both
Day
of us,
if we
yeah.
keep doing this, so.
So we'll,
You
so
know where
here's
I'm-
we're absolutely committed to the project that was approved in 2016. We're looking very seriously at the enhancements that have been suggested, and we'll just leave it in terms of whether they were integrated or whether it was a separate submission. And we'll look at, we are as intent on getting this done as you are. And so we'll continue to visit
It's one
this to
thing
see
to
what
talk about
opportunities
a
might
need
exist.
that hasn't been committed to, or there's not funding attached to it, and it's another to actually have a commitment from 2012, a recommitment, an announcement in 2016, to be told that we'll be up and running by 2017, this critical, critical space, and it's 2017, we're still no further ahead.
No, of course,
That's the
but it's
frustrating
like
part about all
if
this.
if I get approval from my spouse to renovate our kitchen and we're replacing the kitchen cupboards, and then we decide jointly later that we're going to replace the appliances in that same kitchen, we need to have an understanding. And we're not, I'm not making a comparison at all in terms of the importance, but we're talking about the same space and the same program, and a program and a space where it's been, what was approved in June of 2016 has been altered by the proponent. We appreciate and respect and, in fact, welcome that conversation, but it would be imprudent if we didn't do a proper evaluation on both the capital side and the operational side, and in addition, whether we would be able to, and it sounds, hearing from Peter, that we're willing to go back and see if we might be able to separate the two or not.
All right.
But I confidently believe, notwithstanding, I want to see this done as much as you do, as quickly and promptly as we can, but responsibly, and it's that responsible aspect of it that I rely on my ministry.
I really wanted to get into OHIP Plus today, and we'll have to save that till Tuesday. So I'll just quickly ask, briefly we had a discussion, I know my colleague talked about the opiates, and you announced a strategy a few weeks ago. I have to ask, that the limitations of private members are, we can propose ideas without any added cost. So with consultation from law enforcement, knowing that there's two real sides to this opiate crisis is, I guess the legitimately prescribed opiates that are being, redirected to the street, and then there's this counterfeit opiate business. I had a bill that I put forward, the illegal pill press, that would actually allow law enforcement to, access warrants and charge those that are in possession of a pill press that are using those to manufacture counterfeit opiates that are frankly on our street killing people. You announced and talked about in your answers testing strips that can test for fentanyl or other substances. Of course, it's an important measure. I agree with it. It's perhaps a simple but and small step, but an important one. You did refer to my initiative as being oversimplistic. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think I characterized that it would be oversimplistic to believe that single measure would have a material impact, a significant impact in terms of the crisis that we're facing. So individuals in this province are dying at least at the rate of 2 a day.
Sure, absolutely.
And that the preponderance of investment that we, if that's the right word, that we need to make to reduce the level of crisis and hopefully eliminate it, it has to be and has to take a harm reduction approach.
Now, you mentioned, of course, I just want you to know, so you talked about the federal initiative to ban the importation of pill presses. You will now hopefully appreciate the difference between what I was proposing on possession and importation are being two different things. Do you understand the difference?
I'm afraid, Mr. Harris, your time is up.